Well, we have reached the witching hour. It's 7 p.m. I'd like to call this study session of the Lakewood City Council for Monday, August 10th to order. The first item of business is an update on economic development. And for this, we have Ms. Newton.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try to share my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
No, we can't see you either.
Okay, just a moment.
So first, yeah, now we can see a seal.
Okay, here I am.
Well, that's Brianna.
Okay, and screen. Give that a try.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention, since we're right in the middle of getting the money out to the businesses, how grateful they all are. I've just received so many emails and calls from businesses that have received the business grant through the CARES Act, and it's just really saving businesses, and just wanted to make sure that you knew how grateful they are. So thank you very much for that. And so let's get started. What are we talking about this evening? So basically, what we're talking about are the policies and programs that are instrumental to economic development that Council has adopted over the years, that'll help us to sustain a competitive landscape for the future of Lakewood and to retain businesses and attract new ones to the Lakewood area. We'll also talk a little bit about the challenges we're facing, as well as what's going on in some of the industries, and what may happen in the recovery. And of course, you all probably know we likely will not see any meaningful economic recovery until we reach phase 4 as laid out by the state and our governor. In the meantime, the vision and the strategy and the work that we're doing is working quite well and maintaining our momentum. So basically, these are some of the main council policies and programs that you've adopted that have helped to create jobs and to sustain a healthy and vibrant community, both for our residents and for our businesses here in Lakewood. And so we'll be touching on each of those from capital improvements, our catalyst projects, priority programs, and projects that we're working on. Some of the key factors that have occurred over the years: reduction in crime positively affects development, as well as I mentioned, all the visions and policies that you all have put in place over the years. The first few slides of data that we'll be talking about just cover what the permitting looks like for 2017, 18, and 19. And we've also looked at comparing Q1 and 2 of 19 to 2020. The number of permits is in line with Q2 of 2020 versus 2019. But when you take a look at the next slide on permit fees, the change in percentage, when you look at through 2020 Q2, we're up about 63% on permit fees collected. So we have been working throughout the COVID-19 health pandemic and continue to do so. And then looking at valuation, that is up as well, just slightly over the fees at 64%. And then some just quick permitting facts that have occurred in 2020. Permitting did slow approximately 20% at the first onset of COVID-19 in March and April. However, our current permitting activity is back to present levels as compared to 2019. All permitting has been submitted online, electronically, and the permit times were able to actually meet almost on all of them our performance measures in terms of our turnaround times on those. We also have less staff, and we do use some outside consultants to fill in the gaps as needed. As I mentioned, permitting performance is still in line, and we're still staying on track, almost at 100% for all of the permit turnaround. Just wanted to mention also, many times staff that waits for those that are submitting to provide information on some of the permits that need additional attention. Again, another slide showing some of the performance measures for our target days to process these permits. And then getting into a snapshot on what our businesses and jobs look like. As of the end of second quarter of 2020, we had approximately 4,300 businesses doing business here in Lakewood, of which about 2,400 are physically located here, and we have about 750 home-based businesses. And we're still continuing to see new businesses opening, both from quarter 3 and 4 of 2019 and into 2020. If you look at unemployment, that is, as you know, something that we're watching closely. If you look at Lakewood as compared to the state, we're at, or estimated to be, as of June, about 11.7%. The state is about 11.1%, or was at that point of time. And the county was about 11.5%. So we're right in there with the state and the county. In terms of jobs, we've increased our job base approximately 11% over the last 5 years. Let's see. And then we have also conducted nearly 80 business retention and expansion visits thus far in 2020, probably more than that actually. Most of them are by phone and some of them by Zoom call. We have also increased our outreach to local developers as well as property owners, brokers, just to kind of get a sense of what's going on in the market, and also to help to keep all of the projects going and help to understand where the market is turning. And as you know, it really changes by the day, sometimes by the hour. And so we're trying to track that as much as we can. And just wanted to also mention that we are focused, as we'll get more into this presentation, on the downtown development, Pacific Highway development, and also Woodbrook or other industrial development. Lakewood offers many incentives for our businesses and those that are looking to come here, and also for retention and expansion. I just call out a few that seem to rise to the top, which includes our strategic location, close to the ports, Seattle and Tacoma. No local B&O tax is really a big deal for business. We have 2 colleges here, and infrastructure improvements have been significant, as well as the multifamily tax exemption program and diversified residential opportunities. We are looking to join the Pierce County PAL system, hopefully later this year. We're working hard to do that, to increase our transparency and to also provide additional assistance to companies and our coordination with Pierce County and helping to move projects along more efficiently. I wanted to mention too that, as you know, we have 3 opportunity zones. One is in the Woodbrook-Tillicum area, one is in Springbrook, and then the other is in the Lakeview Kendrick Street area. We have several projects that clients have told us that they are taking advantage of the opportunity zone, opportunity and tax advantages. These include in the Lakeview Kendrick area, a 30-unit townhome project that's in the works, as well as a commercial project that was purchased and some redevelopment occurring. In Woodbrook-Tillicum area, there's a former bank building in Tillicum that has been purchased, and they'll be able to take advantage of the opportunity zone tax advantage. The IPT logistics project, which is the redevelopment of the Woodbrook Middle School, as well as another project called the American Lake Logistics, which is also in the Woodbrook area. And then in Springbrook, that project hasn't closed yet, but the folks that are looking at purchasing the former gravel pit may be able to also take advantage of the opportunity zone. Okay, getting into some of our priority areas for development. The downtown district was adopted in October of 2018. There is a list of some of our completed projects on the left, as well as those projects that are in permitting and are current. These projects at this point in time are all still moving forward. And then in the works, we're working with a number of property owners and developers on primarily mixed use redevelopment, as well as the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department are working on a number of infrastructure grants through the Economic Development Administration. Working on getting those submitted, and some of those, if awarded, will cover the downtown infrastructure development. The advantage to getting those grants at this time is that because the unemployment is so high, there is less of a match and therefore less of an financial obligation on the city's part. We're also still working with the Pierce County Library System, although of course that's been on hold, but we do intend to move forward and work with them on a new Lakewood Library, as well as a branch library in Tillicum. And then just like to ask perhaps the city manager to talk a little bit about a build grant opportunity. Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. Just real quick, I think the council's aware one of our key federal priorities is to obtain some flexibility with federal transportation funds. And the BUILD program, which you might recall was previously the Tiger program, are monies that Congress sets aside, just about every year, ranges anywhere from $500 million to several $billion. Typically, those are funding huge mega projects. Actually, here in Washington State, the state has been the recipient of several of them, as well as Sound Transit. So what the city of Lakewood has been doing for the past few years is working with a number of what I would define as medium-sized cities here in Washington State to establish a set-aside. And actually, Representative Rick Larson up north has been the impetus for spearheading that and has the support of the rest of the delegation, including our representative Congress, Mr. Heck. So right now what we're doing is actually working with our delegation to have some language inserted in a future transportation bill that would set aside, for example, 30% of those BUILD dollars for medium-sized cities, cities with a population of say 20 to 75 or 90,000. And of course, Lakewood is right in there. If we were to, if this change was to occur, basically the city of Lakewood, we could go and, submit a funding request for $5 million, $10 million, $20 million that would allow us to move forward in implementing the sub-area plan, those road improvements that you identified a couple of years ago. And then the matching monies would come from, the dollars that we have collected, the transportation mitigation fees, and if other funding is necessary, we would have to find that as well. But that's kind of the one of our motivations for pursuing the build funds. Also, what's unique about the build transportation funds is that they have to have an economic development component. They have to create jobs. And the benefit cost analysis needs to show that. And certainly just, the initial sub-area plan that this body implemented a couple of years ago certainly shows that. So again, just wanted to point that out, that, the transportation funding request is also an economic development tool that we are pursuing with our congressional delegation. And back to you, Ms. Newton.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to Lakewood Landing. We did provide you with an update on Lakewood Landing several months back. We're continued to work on that project. We've completed a number of tasks on our way to getting this done, and we continue to work with WashDOT, our consultant, as well as our collaborative design team and broker team, and the property owners. And we are starting our significant developer outreach to get more input on the project so we can refine it. We're also going to go through a pre-app process in September. And pardon me. So this project has a great opportunity for Lakewood in that we have an opportunity to design the future of it. And it could be a really a transformational project there on Pack Highway on I-5. So then the current project as it stands in the central core, which is about 12 acres, is composed of 760 units of residential, 87,000 square feet of retail, also has restaurants, entertainment, and a central core park block. And this slide just shows some images of what the central core block could look like, our park block. As I mentioned, it's about 12 acres, and we are very excited to move this project forward. There's a brochure for this, which I believe you've all received copies of, and that can also be found on our website. Then getting to Lakewood Station District, which Ms. Spear will provide a detailed update for you after this presentation. Some of the components that I just wanted to touch on are new street program or street system, promotion of the missing middle in terms of housing, a form-based code. Of course, Lakewood Landing is the main component of the Lakewood Station District. This also encourages mixed use, retail, multimodal transportation, and so forth, being or including the Lakewood Station. And it's scheduled for adoption around April or May of 2021. Sorry, that is a typo there. So 2021. And moving on to industrial development, the city of Lakewood has currently approximately 700 acres of industrial lands. There's more opportunity in the air corridor because the underlying zoning is industrial. We've already seen some projects, including the Electrolux building off of South Tacoma Way, and a new project, a redevelopment of Oak Brook Elementary, as well as the swap meet, which had redeveloped to the Starlight Distribution Center. We currently have about 1.8 million square feet of new and speculative industrial, and about 350 to 400,000 of built to suit. Most of this is in the Woodbrook, or a lot of it is in the Woodbrook Business Park. But as you have seen, there are other areas such as the Starlight distribution on South Tacoma Way and Springbrook, where we're seeing industrial development expanded to the Springbrook area. As of the end of 2018, our vacancy rate for industrial was under 1%. So lots of opportunity for industrial development. And then on to Woodbrook. This is a map. It's a very fluid map. It's not exact to what it looks like, but it's a close representation of what we're seeing in Woodbrook. And of course, the items on the left are a list of major industrial projects that we have in Lakewood currently. One of the projects was canceled due to cost of land. And we know that the cost of land has doubled from 2017 to 2019. Cost of land now in the area, Lakewood area, for industrial is approximately $17 to $18 a square foot. Due to COVID-19, of course, some of the projects were on hold, but we're seeing many of those moving forward. One such project is a redevelopment of a multifamily complex. Residents were allowed to stay, and we will work with them, but that one may take a little longer to redevelop as well due to the residential in that area. A private owner has also obtained an EB5 regional center designation, which will help to attract foreign direct investment to the area. Okay. Other areas that we're focused on include the International District. I already mentioned the industrial on South Tacoma Way at 84. And in addition to that, Coleman American Moving and Storage purchased the former Oakwood Elementary School off of South Tacoma Way, and they will be constructing a building on that property. There's been a lot of demolition of old tired buildings on South Tacoma Way to repurpose, and also repurposing of the former Deja Vu on South Tacoma Way. We also have a design in place for a new signalization at Stillicum Durango, and we're going after a grant to complete the construction of that project. That's another Economic Development Administration grant application that we are submitting. And then Lakeview Kendrick neighborhoods, of course, the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan is a key component there. And then reinvestment in the area, primarily multifamily and residential, and some commercial. In the North Clear Zone, we have, as you know, a DoD contract with the Department of the Army. Our first project is purchase of the Tactical Tailor lots, which has been completed. And then we're now working on purchasing their building. We've also completed update of zoning and codes on the North Clear Zone and air corridor to address non-conforming uses. And then in Springbrook, the rezone to industrial, as well as expanding the city park and addressing Clover Creek environmental issues. And then in Tillicum, as you know, 2 massive interchanges will change the landscape of that area. And we do have some retail reinvestment on Union Avenue, and we're continuing to work with Habitat for Humanity as well. And then getting into a little bit on Western State Hospital, we continue to work with them on current upgrades to their facilities. We have, as you know, received a new master plan. And then we wanted to look at what is the economic impact of Western State Hospital. And these 2 charts here basically show the impacts of employment as well as the value added for their financials and income, the total output, both for Pierce County and based on assumptions, what we think we're getting here in the city of Lakewood. And we're looking at what it looks like now in 2019, as well as what the impact will be in 2030 current development scenario based on the master plan that we have received. Of course, the city provides services to Western State Hospital or DSHS in terms of police protection, and also the West Pierce Fire provides services to them. And there's significant cost of new construction, and the permit fees are significant for this project, as is the sales tax. Just wanted to mention the numbers that are under sales tax, I changed. It's a little bit different than your packet. These numbers are for Lakewood only. The numbers in your packet included other taxing authorities. So this one has been changed. I also wanted to mention that there are, as you know, many less restrictive alternative placement homes or adult family homes in Lakewood due to the proximity to Western State Hospital. And then getting into housing, we've had so far this year 23 new single family residential units applied for, with an average valuation of over $350,000 as compared to 12 in this same time period for 2019. Average value was a little bit lower as well. We've had 4 new short plats, 6 have been finaled, 3 final plats. Just a little bit of explanation on the final plats. There's one on Vernon Avenue, which is 20 lots, and that one has been finaled. There was one issued in Oak Brook that was 16 lots, but it's been on hold. I'm not sure if they're going to move forward. And then one final plat applied for this year on Gravelly Lake Drive, that is 19 lots. We've had 2 multifamily projects finaled, and those were both multifamily tax exemption projects, the Townview Apartments and Wellstone in Springbrook. And we also have one new small mixed use project, 7 units with office on Bristol, which is within the town center. Okay, rental housing. First of all, just want to thank you for approving this project as well. It's been very successful, and we feel like it's really going to change housing and help to create a more healthy and safe housing here in Lakewood. It already has, as you can see, all of the multifamily repairs, major repairs and remodels that have occurred due to the rental housing safety program in large part. Third quarter activity, while we did slow on rental housing for a period of time, we've ramped that back up. And in fact, we're really going full force on that as well. We've had a little bit of trouble getting some owners to sign up. And so we're putting a lot more effort in that as well. Third quarter activity increased significantly. And as of now, we've collected probably over that now, but at least 70% of our budget for 2020 as of July 31st. Okay. And then just talking a little bit about who's who on development projects. On the left, there is a list of contractors and developers that we're currently working with or that are working in Lakewood. And then on the right is a list of the primary businesses and specific people that we're working with on recruitment, with a main focus on attracting mixed use to the area. Okay, and then getting into some of the industry areas and kind of what's going on in the industries. And we've been watching closely, one of which is hotel or hospitality, occupancy, and so forth. As you know, they really took a hit, and we've been helping them to get that going. But we also wanted to point out that the DuPont Lakewood area has fared better than the region generally and the nation due to having newer hotels. So that's been a benefit for us. Comfort Inn finally received their certificate of occupancy. Wood Springs Suites is under construction, and the Spring Hill Suites is in permitting, and hopefully they'll be pulling their permits soon. And then retail and restaurants. Retail and office seem to be the most affected by COVID-19. As mentioned earlier, we will likely not see any local or really any economic improvement until we reach phase 4 as defined by the governor. Industrial is very busy now. We have seen lots of projects trying to keep those moving forward, particularly those that are support logistics, medical, food, and so forth. And as you know, the small businesses are feeling the effects of the continued shutdowns, and the longer this continues, the more we will likely see those closures happening. And the programs such as you have put in place for those businesses with the grants are really helping. So we're very thankful for that. Everybody's trying to adapt. Some national chains are reducing their footprints, especially restaurants. And we are really faring better than some of the larger cities in some other states due to our proximity, close proximity to transportation networks, JBLM, and also in large part to all of the great policies and programs that you've put in place over the years. And there is significant new interest in the South Sound. And so we're excited about that once we can get going on helping those businesses to come to Lakewood. Okay, and then US office, you can see some of the statistics nationwide of what's going on in the office market. Co-working is difficult, of course. Absorption's negative for the first time in a decade. And here in Lakewood, though, you know, we are affected, obviously. It's kind of a mixed bag, as I mentioned, lots of renegotiations and closures due to longevity of the crisis. But however, there are 2 office buildings that are full for the first time in years. Lundstrom Building, which is on Bridgeport and Lakewood Town Center Drive, and the Clover Park Shops. And so we do also, I just wanted to mention that we do have a significant recruitment effort going on, response to an EDB lead through the state. for a U.S. Space Command headquarters, which could include up to 450,000 square feet of office space and upwards of 2,000 jobs. This is an effort we're working on with JBLM, the EDB, and we're also coordinating with the city of Tacoma as well on this project. And then industrial and commercial, as I mentioned, lots of spec development is kind of waned a little bit, but we've already got all those projects primarily in the pipeline. And I'd just like to mention, it'll be interesting on the timing on when those projects will move forward. Many of them are already moving forward. A lot of them are focused on maintaining the rents and negotiating with tenants and so forth in the current projects. Overall, the deal volume for industrial has been less affected than the other industries. And as I mentioned, Lakewood is better positioned to benefit from recovery. It's a smaller market, and we have some great policies and programs in place. Okay, and then looking at what are we doing, what is the city doing, as well as what are the businesses doing. I'm sure you've read these, but we're just continuing our services, trying to increase efficiencies as much as possible, reaching out to the businesses, continuing our advertising and so forth. The CARES grants, TDBG Deferred Loan Now grant, and adapting and taking action. And the businesses are doing a lot of the same, trying to stay afloat, and we're helping them to do that. Some of the biggest challenges we have, no surprise, revenue streams, maintaining our communications, doing as much outreach and collaboration as possible, and constantly adapting to the new landscape that we're in right now. And as I mentioned, true economic recovery will occur in phase 4. Business assistance, it's overwhelming. However, we just keep moving forward, and we will likely see other business closures, and the end is not yet in sight. So we just have to keep doing our work and keep providing assistance, and keep those businesses going and attract the new ones. And also transitioning, of course, to new ways of doing business with the social distancing, PPE, and so forth. Still a competitive market, and technology is accelerating. Priorities, as I mentioned, the PALS, joining the PALS system will be a big deal for us and help us with our projects. Continuing those infrastructure projects will be important as well to support development, our efficiencies, codes, and policies, updating them as appropriate, and to encourage future development. The Lakewood Station Subarea Plan, downtown development, industrial development, our long and short-term projects, particularly Lakewood Landing, which is a great opportunity for Lakewood. Increasing that collaboration and continuing our marketing and advertising. And just coming full circle back to economic development, how are we going to get out of this? Growth is going to be very important. Continuing our business retention and expansion through outreach surveys and assistance, and then our recruitment attraction, of which workforce and education are key components of, and innovation and entrepreneurialism. The Lemonade Day program was put on hold in a way. The Lakewood Chamber is trying to do an online version of that. And in the meantime, and we hope to welcome the full version of Lemonade Day next year. And then I'd just like to, again, thank you for all your efforts putting forward and promoting and helping to have programs and policies to attract and retain the businesses. I feel like we're in a pretty good position, actually a great position to get it back on track and move forward once we reach phase 4. In the meantime, we continue to work, and also just like to close by saying I'm really proud of the staff and leadership and council for everything that's being done for businesses. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from council? Mr. Brandstetter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Newton, for the wide-ranging and pretty comprehensive overview of about where we are. I had a couple of questions that I just wanted to clarify. In the Western State Hospital slide, there was a table called Exhibit 7 that is some sort of a comparison between Pierce County and Lakewood. It's the chart on the bottom that I'm actually trying to figure out. What is that trying to communicate to me? It seems like the first line is very similar for both, but indirect and induced seem very dissimilar between us and the county. What's that chart communicating to me?
So the differences are, of course, the top one is based on Western State Hospital as it sits today. And then below annual economic impact is based on the current development scenario or the new master plan. And so based on our new master plan, we know, or we're looking at Pierce County, what are the economic impacts to Pierce County? And economic impact looks at the change in employment based on industry. And so Pierce County shows economic impact direct is the employment that would be at Western State Hospital based on the proposed master plan. Indirect would be other jobs that are created as a result of Western State Hospital being here. Induced would be spending into the economy. And so each of those scenarios, both our current situation and the new situation, are based on those same aspects. And then we attempted to look at what the impacts are to the city of Lakewood. And so you still have the direct employment that is at Western State Hospital. You have a certain number of vendors that also are jobs that are in Lakewood as a result of Western State Hospital. And so that's what we look at in terms of economic impact for those areas. Does that answer your question?
So if I understood correctly, as they move forward between now and 2030, assuming implementing the master plan, while there'll be an increase in employment and the jobs will physically be in Lakewood, that the indirect and induced impact of continuing to have a hospital here, there's almost none. 3 indirect jobs and no induced jobs. Is that, am I interpreting that correctly?
Yep, so it's making those assumptions, and that is correct, and that there's not a lot of change in terms of indirect and induced effects to the city of Lakewood, the current situation versus the new master plan being proposed.
Okay, and this doesn't take into consideration a growth in adult family homes or similar things that would be precipitated by the master plan.
It does not take into consideration growth of adult family homes. That's correct.
So they're neither an indirect or an induced element. Okay. Let me ask that on your slide about incentives, there was the family wage job creation credit that was listed. And as one of our, and I think I know what that is, but I'm also not sure. Could you refresh me? And is that due to expire? Is that due to expire?
It is due to expire, I want to say at the end of this year. I don't know if Mr. Bewer's on, but I can double check on that for you.
Okay, so since it was valuable to put on your slide, are you thinking of suggesting that we extend that?
You know, personally, I think due to COVID and everything else that's happening, I'm not sure that businesses, that's top of mind for them. So I would be in favor of extending it. But I have to, see what other team members think, but I would be in favor of extending that to give businesses an opportunity to take advantage of it.
So I guess when we get to budgeting, we'll see where that is. And then my last question is, you mentioned that one of the things that businesses were doing in this COVID situation is renegotiating leases. Do you know how well that's working for businesses in Lakewood? Or is that something that they're finding landlords receptive to, or is that just something they wish they could do?
Well, everybody I've talked to is in the middle of renegotiating. It's not working for all landlords. It depends obviously on how much they're in debt and a lot of different factors. But I would say the primarily, or the majority of landlords and tenants are very closely connected and working through this together. So yeah, I think it's working pretty well, and not for everyone obviously, but I think that most of them have been able to come to terms to be able to keep businesses at least in the space until we can get to a place where they can operate more efficiently and be able to make income that they can sustain.
So is there, are we playing a role to try to help those negotiations work, or is the county in a position where they're doing some things that are helping those things get resolved?
I'm not sure if the county is. For us, I think we're just aware that it's going on, and in talking in our outreach to the businesses, everyone I've talked to has been able to negotiate some type of a lease that would be adequate for them. So I would say, in a way, coordinating to ensure that things are going along. Well, I'm not aware of any involvement by Pierce County to get involved in the negotiations.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions, Ms. Newton, about the opportunity zones that are available in Lakewood. Is Lakewood Landing, the location there, is that included within one of the opportunity zones?
No, unfortunately, it's just outside of an opportunity zone.
Right. And the second question is, with the opportunity zones that we do have designated, what activity, if any, are we seeing as a result of that incentive?
As I mentioned, there are a few projects. There's some property being purchased in Woodbrook, Telecom, Springbrook, the Kendrick Street area. So all of those folks are able to take advantage of the opportunity zone. There are some projects also that I've been told that they will be taking advantage of the opportunity zone, industrial, multifamily, primarily industrial and multifamily.
I know, I would hope so, because it seems like it's a pretty good federal tax deal that doesn't take additional money away from the city to do other good work. And with regard to that, through the BREs that you're doing and the other kind of ear to the ground out there in the community, what are you hearing, if anything, that the small business community needs more of? And are they asking the city for any other assistance other than what we're providing?
Well, money, I mean, financial, not really, other than, you know, there's always some that ask for, I guess I would say, flexibility in regulations and
Right.
that, but primarily financial assistance, that rises to number one, as well as marketing. One of the things I was surprised at, and with COVID-19, the number of businesses that either weren't using social media or they weren't using it as efficiently as they could. So financial, marketing, there's businesses that are having issues. This is related to marketing and trying to get the word out, because the perception is, for example, a business that may be in the international zone, maybe they don't speak English. So the perception that their business may not be as safe to come to, those are some of the things that have been issues as well. And then being able to provide translations has been really helpful as well. I think we received a lot more applications because we had at least put out the applications in different languages. So offering that to them as well. Those are the top ones that come to mind.
And then in terms of the marketing you mentioned, are we getting much feedback from the Build Your Better Here campaign that we spent a fair chunk of change on yet? Are you getting any sort of leads from that, or
yes,
inquiries?
Yes, yes, Mr. Whalen, I have received actually more leads this year during COVID through the Build Your Better Here website than I have prior. So I think we're starting to get some real traction with that. Of course, we get a lot of, you know, inquiries for sales and such as well, but that is increasing. We definitely are getting that. And
we track those because we have a dedicated website link that people will click into if they have an inquiry to the city.
That's correct. All of those leads are tracked. That's correct.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Newton? I would just make one comment in response to one of Mr. Branstadter's questions. The Pierce County, out of its CARES Act funding, has approved a mortgage and rent assistance program for businesses. I think it's 5,000 a month up to 3 months. And that has not yet been implemented, but it should be shortly. So when that happens, you gotta stay tuned and help people get in line. There's going to be a special emphasis on reaching out to businesses, especially minority small businesses that might not get the word through normal chambers of commerce, et cetera. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Newton, have you heard anything about shopping centers, Lakewood Town Center, and the desire by Amazon and some other large retailers that have fulfillment centers in locating in some of our shopping areas that might have some more capacity?
Yes, Ms. Farmer, yes, I actually have been hearing a little bit of that from RPAI has mentioned that to me. And I also, not through Target, but I heard that that is a consideration for, I know that Target just went through remodel. But as time goes on, some of the larger spaces may be converted or paired off to an Amazon type distribution. So I have heard a little bit, but I haven't spent a lot of time looking at that yet.
It's an interesting conundrum. It's good to have a paying tenant, but it's difficult if that paying tenant doesn't attract foot traffic for the other folks. And so that's a tough one. I was also curious about the industrial zones. We've got a lot of opportunity, and I don't know if you've had a chance to pivot on any of or if it's included in the Build Your Better Here about really targeting that. It seems to be a very popular thing right now.
Yes, industrial is one of our focuses for the Build Your Better Here campaign. We've done both online, and then we've also done targeted trade industry publication in Western real estate business, print advertising. We didn't get a lot of response from that ad, so most of it has been targeted online because we're seeming to get more response online. But yes, industrial is definitely one of our 4 targets for Build Your Better Here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Find my button there. Thank you. Are there any more questions from council? I don't see any hands up. Pause here a minute. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Newton. It's surprising in some ways to see how much economic activity is going on in the COVID environment, but there are a lot of things going on in Lakewood, and we appreciate your efforts. Thanks again.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Buer had a question or a comment.
Mr. Buer.
If I could expand a little bit upon Ms. Farmer's questions. One of the things that is happening is that the pandemic is speeding up the conversion of malls into something else. There is a lot of leases being renegotiated nationwide. Many of the smaller retail outlets may not survive, but housing, particularly in this area, is a hot market, and I'm expecting that as we go through more of this process, we will hear more from RPAI about housing. And there have been some larger mall outlets have approached Amazon about their centers in other locations. So that conversation continues. I just wanted to add a little bit more for council's edification, and that's all.
Yeah, I would note that according to at least one McKinsey article I read, they estimate that the pandemic has accelerated the demise of brick and mortar retail and the rise of online retail by about 10 years. It's not that the trend changed, it just accelerated. So We'll see if they're right. Well, thanks again. And we'll now move to our next item of business, which is the Lakewood Station District Sub-Area Plan Update from Ms. Spear.
Thank you and good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Tiffany Spear. I hope everyone is feeling well and healthy this evening. I'm going to also be sharing my screen through this presentation. This is related to the Lakewood Station District sub-area planning effort, which is ongoing right now. And in your actual packet, it starts on page 35, and then all of the attachments start on page 41. But I'll share my screen starting now. Oops. So what we're going to be doing tonight, since it's been a little while since the council's been presented with information, is kind of step back and take an overview look of the sub-area itself, as well as the population that lives there. Looking at the survey results from this summer's online and in-mail survey, reviewing several outstanding policy issues that are still needing resolution within the next month or so with our consultants, and then look at the current legislative schedule and how this is actually on a rather fast track if you compare it to other sub-area planning efforts. So first of all, if you look at the map here, you'll see on the right, the outlines in red are the boundaries for the Lakewood Station sub-area that the council directed be used starting in January of this year when the effort really got underway. And then comparing up to the northwest would be the downtown sub-area. They're obviously different shapes, but generally the same amount of acreage, a little over 300 gross acres. Lakewood Station District sub-area is 108th Street over to 512 down to I-5, and then the western boundary is Bridgeport Way. Within this area, excuse me, in addition to the commercial, industrial, and retail, there's also mixed use and multifamily areas, and those are in particular areas that have developed at lower densities than originally planned or currently authorized. So this map just shows a couple of the key items of interest or areas of interest, I should say. First of all, you've got St. Clair Hospital along Bridgeport. You've got the Sounder Station. And then as Ms. Newton was just mentioning, you've got the Lakewood Landing project along parallel to I-5. Base Lewis McCord is immediately adjacent across I-5. And then you have West Pierce Fire and Rescue. One other that's not mentioned here, but is there visually is the park and ride that's there along the 512 Pacific Highway or South Tacoma Way interchange. One thing that we did with this sub area is these red boundaries that you see are the hard boundaries for the sub area, and within it, the housing and land use analysis and plan and strategies are considered. But regarding transportation, the consultants, Burke, took a look at an area that's within a half a mile of the Sounder Station itself, and you'll see a red dotted line, what that looks like. It's larger than the specific sub-area boundaries, but the purpose of doing so was to just notice traffic patterns, to be able to plan for transit use and freight mobility, as well as just pedestrian, non-motorized traffic within the sub-area. Oops. And incorporate that into the plan. And the other thing, of course, is you'll see immediately up to the northwest is the downtown sub-area plan. And that half center buffer to the Pierce Transit Center that's within downtown comes up almost right next to the Sounder Station. So again, this allowed for a little more transit and commuting analysis to be done. Some demographics for the sub area. I don't think any of this is brand new information for you, but just to summarize, it is a relatively small population at this point within the area itself, but within half a mile of the study area, you've got about 13% of the city's population. It has within the sub area about 2/3 of the median income of the city and about half of the county's median income. It's also more diverse ethnically and racially. You'll see a higher percentage within the sub-area of all other races and ethnicities besides white in the sub-area versus citywide. It is located within what's been termed a racially and ethnically concentrated area of poverty. And what that means is that, at least 50% of the residents are, I'm sorry, let me start over. People of color are more than 50% of the residents, and that the poverty rate within the area is either higher than 40% or 3 times the poverty rate of tracts in the metropolitan area. So long story short, this is a diverse community. It has a lower median income, and that is reflected, I think, in moving forward, not only looking at the situation as it sits right now, but what planning will be going forward into the next 25, 30 years. Continuing with the demographics, you'll see that the city overall has a relatively backward, if you want to term it that, renter and owner-occupied housing stock. That's even more pronounced in the sub-area. You see an owner-occupied percentage within the LSDS sub-area of 17.4%. Citywide, it's 44.5%. When you jump down to renters, it's 69.3% within the sub-area as opposed to 46.3% in the city overall. The median home values and median incomes are also lower in the sub-area than citywide or countywide. And then you'll see the educational attainment. You do have within the sub-area a lower number of high school graduates or GED owners, and also lower percentages of college, either with or without a degree. Economically speaking, the employment, you'll see that most people are employed. Looking at the chart itself, you'll see that half of the people within the sub-area are employed in services, which tends to be lower incomes, and that's reflected in what you just saw in the other demographics. Retail is another large percentage of the population's employment. And then you see that the businesses included within the sub-area, whether or not it's the residents that live in the sub-area that work there, retail businesses and service businesses are really a large portion of what's located within the sub-area, in addition to the Lakewood Station District itself, the Sounder Station itself. So jumping to public engagement, if you'll remember, this sub-area plan was launched last December after a commerce grant was awarded to the city to create it. And the lakewoodstationdistrict.org website has been up since last December. There's been outreach through the city's Connections magazine. Both winter and summer issues this year have included information about it. In February, before COVID shut things down in person, we did have a stakeholder session with not only property owners and developers active in Lakewood, but also utilities within the sub-area and neighborhood association representatives. Since then, because in part of COVID, our public outreach has been online, and then we've had sessions at both the Planning Commission and then at the council. In addition to all of those different outreach mechanisms, we did a survey and a mailing introduction to this whole effort. So in May, there was just a hi, this is what's going on in your sub-area, did you know? And then in the end of May through July 15th, there was an online survey provided, and we did do an online invitation to that, a hard copy mailing invitation, and then we were posting information at the Sounder Station about the survey. We ended up getting about 95 responses to that survey. So I'm going to quickly run through some of the high-level responses we got, but I wanted to point out who actually answered the survey. What you saw there is that 58% lived within within Lakewood, but outside of the sub-area. So the majority of those who answered live in Lakewood, but do not live in the Lakewood Station area. About 17% worked within the sub-area, and then we did have about a 14% response rate of those who do live in the sub-area. With jumping down to the bottom regarding age brackets, about 30% of those who responded were between 30 and 49 years old, and then the majority of those who responded were over 50. And then in terms of renting or owning, you'll see most of those who responded were owners, which is kind of opposite of what you know is the case both citywide and within the sub-area. And so just keeping all of that in mind as you look at the responses to the survey, I think it's still got some really good information and some good direction provided to the city as it moves forward with this project. What do you like about the sub-area now? What I've done here is highlight for you the top 5 answers. So this is as it is, what do you like? And you'll see transit and commuting is the top answers, including close to JBLM. It's a good location for business, and then the affordable housing that's available. So those were the highlights of what people like right now. Looking at what's important for changes and vision within the sub-area plan itself, you'll see the overall responses. So again, keeping in mind who actually answered the survey, this is all of those responses. The biggest one was making the area well-designed and attractive. Second priority was non-motorized or non-auto transit and walkability, for instance. Third highest was new retail, restaurant, and entertainment. Fourth was new jobs within the sub-area. And then the fifth was the non-auto connections to downtown. So going back to that map you saw earlier of the half-mile radius between downtown and the Lakewood Station area, is there opportunity to improve shuttling, commuting with transit connections there perhaps? These are the same questions with slightly different answers, because what this is the breakout of simply those who live within the sub-area. What are the important things for the residents there now? Their top answers were wanting the area well-designed and attractive. Retail, restaurant, and entertainment expansions was the next one. New jobs was third. Sidewalks and pathways was fourth, and then tied to that was open space and parks. And then again, those same, what's important to you in this area? This is now for those who work within the sub-area, so slightly different focus of those who are answering. More new jobs within the area. Again, well-designed and attractive. Again, the new retail, restaurant, and entertainment. And then sidewalks and pathways and actually new homes were tied. And I would just make the point looking at these statistics here that it looks like those who work in the area would be willing to consider living in the area because they feel that new homes would be a good idea there. So you might have just a waiting audience for some additional housing stock within the Lakewood Station District. Jumping over to the Sounder Station itself, we did do the survey in cooperation with Sound Transit because they are making improvements at the station district somewhat concurrent with this planning process. Of course, their schedule's been disrupted due to COVID, but they are still looking at these answers. What would make you more likely to use the Sounder Station? Again, those walking connections, in addition to adding parking at the station itself. And then there were a number of other answers termed other. Going through those answers, most of them related to safety at the station and in the parking lot, as well as more frequent service to and from the Sounder Station. Not to leave out the walk shop. These were intended for primarily children to be able to participate in this as well. And so there was special handouts provided for kids to be able to just walk around the area and provide their responses to what do you see, what do you feel, what do you like, what do you don't like, as well as what would you wish for. And so just a few that were demonstrative of the kind of answers we got. There was the desire for safe parks. The train station was seen as a positive and an attractive thing. Buildings were seen as run down and needing improvement. And then you see on the bottom, what do you wish for? A balanced economy. And what I'm taking that to mean is people working and living within the same area and being happy to do so. So jumping to some of the issues that are outstanding as we move through this process. Before I get into this in great detail, I just want to let you know, as I said, this process began last November, December. Since then, the consultant group has been moving very quickly because per the grant terms, we have until next May for the city to take action to actually adopt the plan itself. And then similar to downtown, there's also a form-based code to go with this sub-area, as well as the SEPA planned action, meaning if something is applied for down the road that falls within the development densities and intensities assumed in the planned action, they will not have to go through SEPA themselves again. So all of those pieces have been moving forward throughout this year. And we're at the point now where drafts are starting to come out. The planned action is the first one. And then within a month, we'll be seeing a draft plan. So the vision and policies, and then also the draft form-based code. And then all of those things will start to make their way through the legislative review later this fall. But having said that, the things that are outstanding right now for the council to be aware of, first of all, related to affordable housing. This is an area, as I mentioned through the demographics that I presented, that is lower income, lower housing prices and values, and lower homeownership rate. And so there's been a concern throughout this whole thing of making sure that there's not a sudden displacement of residents to somewhere else or nowhere else because there's nothing in Lakewood that they could afford anymore. And so there's going to be a lot of focus within the plan on how to avoid displacement. They may be moving to a new housing unit, but it's going to still be something that they can afford within this area ideally. The idea then is also to look at missing middle. You've heard that term now, I think, in a number of different venues and discussions, but essentially not looking at purely subsidized housing and not looking at high end or general market rate, whatever the highest asking price could be, but the middle housing. And that at this point, given the type of zoning that's already in this area and the price points that we would be trying to encourage, would be row housing or attached single family with parking provided. Much of what's already in this area right now is multifamily. There is also displacement potential, not only for that multifamily, but for some of the single family homes that are in this area, as well as units in an RV park. So all of this is to say that we're still working on what's the ideal mix of mixed housing and middle housing to present to the council for consideration, but we are being very sensitive to who's living there now and not wanting to be displacing them. Secondly is density. And so the map on the right side of your screen, that darker brown, that is all zoned MF3, multifamily 3. And then it's hard to see, but actually down Bridgeport Way, there's just, it looks like it's one parcel deep yellow, that is residential 3. Most, if not all of the rest of the area is really not set for residential development other than what may come into, for instance, Lakewood Landing, as Ms. Newton was talking about earlier tonight. But in any event, looking at the way development has happened in the MF3 zone of this part of the city, the density is much lower than is allowed currently. And so part of the focus of the development of this plan has not been, let's rezone everything and see a new nirvana here. It's what can we do to encourage the using of what's available within the current zones? What can we do to make it more streamlined, to make it more development friendly, to be able to maximize the zoning that is available already within what the current zones are? And so the idea here would be you would see that densification happen where you see the dark brown, but we don't know exactly where any changes in density, whether it's still called MF3 or whether some rezoning might happen for residential, would happen within this boundary of the sub area. The third big area is transportation, and a couple of items within transportation as a topic. This map shows you the various levels or intensities of roads in the sub area. The darker purple are what are considered arterials, and then the gray or the green, the darker green, is called a local road. There's not really the collector, which is in between those two. But much of this area has very wide rights of way, meaning they're even beyond the standard 60 foot, they're out to 80 feet in some cases. And so consultants in the city have been talking about what to do with those rights of way. Does it make sense to actually narrow the right of way in order to have a better design standard for roads, and then also allow some additional land to be available for development over time, for parking, for whatever would happen as time goes by. So that continues to be a discussion not only among the Public Works and Community Development Department, but with our consultants as to the best recommendation there. And then also related to transportation are the effects of the growth that's anticipated within Lakewood Landing, as well as filling in those areas that are anticipated for higher densification over time. the effect they have on intersections. You'll see the circles on this map show you various intersections studied so far by our consultants. At first, they were raising questions with 4 of these intersections, but as we've had more discussions with them, they're down to just 1, which is the one at Bridgeport and Pacific Highway. And we're trying to figure out at this point, the final product isn't done yet, how to anticipate the load on that intersection and what may happen with needing to do, whether it's capital improvements or not. It could be restriping, it could be signalization changes, but something there if it's needed in order to help anticipate and absorb the growth that's going to be coming within this sub area. So in terms of process, as I mentioned, we're in the point of our consultants putting forward initial drafts. We are going to do a preliminary review by, for instance, WashDOT, maybe some other utilities or other public agencies, as well as key stakeholders of the planned action. So they can give us reactions not only about the intersection analysis I was just mentioning, but some of the other things we're looking at in terms of transportation. And then the plan and the form-based code will be also presented to pretty much the same group as the stakeholders that met in February of this year. So letting them see ahead of time before the true public hearings start, what do we have, and then to seek their feedback. Legislative review itself, we have this coming to the Planning Commission to begin in October of this year. They will wrap their work up, I believe, by December 16th at the latest. And then it is slated at this point to come to council starting next February. And once more, the idea here is that action happens before Memorial Day of 2021 in order to meet the grant deadlines. So with that, just a reference again to all of the attachments, most of which you've actually have seen before. Their draft documents and deliverables that were provided to the Department of Commerce earlier this year. But besides that, Mr. Mayor, I'm ready to answer questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Spear? Quite detailed. I think it takes some time to digest, but we appreciate the depth of your work.
Thank you.
So if there are any questions, Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Spear, I just wanted to ask about a couple of items to see if they are a part of the work going forward to do that, but that you didn't mention specifically, and that under the transportation portion where there is both you mentioned the intersection at Bridgeport and Pacific Highway, but is the consideration of should happen there and include the big separation of that rail line on Bridgeport? Or if it can be somehow be documented in the plan what the intent long term for that is. And in the same vein on transportation, some consideration of the role of bus rapid transit being extended to pass through the sub area. And maybe some idea about where the ideal, but since bus rapid transit has fewer stops, where those sorts of stops might be.
We can certainly add that in.
I was curious about narrowing rights of way.
Yeah.
I was curious about.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, and then I was curious about narrowing rights of way. Would that be something like someone redeveloping a parcel mandating that they pay for a vacation of the 10 feet of right of way in front of their property so that they could comply with some units? Or, I mean, we can't give away the right of way. So I'd be interesting in the final plan to see if that becomes an element of it. What the strategy would be to actually transfer ownership of rights of way without gifting it.
There's actually been some discussion about that idea. Councilmember Brandstetter and Mr. Buer, if you're wanting to jump in, please do at any point. But very preliminarily, there has been a discussion and we've termed it global vacation. And the idea is actually as a separate action, but at the same time, as review of the plan and the planned action and the form-based code, the city council would look at certain rights of way within the sub area that would either all of those that are at that 80-foot width or maybe select ones, we're not sure. But taking a look at actually using them as an economic incentive for redevelopment attraction. So yes, the city would say this is an 80-foot right of way. We are going to narrow it down to 60 feet, for instance, which means the parcels along either side would get 10 feet. And that 10 foot would be certainly I don't want to say a gift because we're not going down that path, but it's a dedication back to private property owners in order to incentivize their redevelopment of their parcel. We're not there yet. It's been a conversation had with our consultants, but just to let the council know that is something that's been brought up.
Thank you.
Just to add a little bit more information to that inquiry, if we were to do some sort of global vacation, what would the final design of the streets look like? And that's something that we keep discussing, and ultimately it's going to come to the city council for some decisions on that particular issue. This has also resulted in the public works and engineering manager or director looking at all of the streets in the city of Lakewood to find where we have other problems as well. Overall, I think it comes to something like 250 streets. So these are problems the city of Lakewood inherited upon incorporation. For now, we're trying to figure out what to do in Lakeview, but there's some other policy decisions to be made in the future with how to handle these other streets and other parts of the city.
Mr. Whalen.
So, Ms. Spear, looking at pages, I think it's 45-year report, but it starts at 150-ish or so of ours. I'm thinking about the transportation improvements it's 151 of our packet, page 45 of the hard written material. Are we anticipating a recommendation or suggestion for some transportation mitigation fee or impact fee akin to what we did in the downtown sub-area plan for specific improvements? Because I don't see recommendations yet here.
No, the intent is that there would not be that type of a recommendation. And the analysis that's being done as we speak by our consultants are addressing the concerns regarding capacity and levels of service at all of these intersections.
Mm-hmm.
The one that continues to be a question, as I mentioned, is Bridgeport and
Right.
Pacific. But yeah, no transportation mitigation fees are anticipated.
Okay. There's some comment there on page 152 about the Sound Transit System Access Fund, which would be handy for some of the curb gutter, sidewalk, bike lane, street lighting improvements that might be necessary. Do we have a sense of what that might comport to in terms of dollars?
I'm sorry, I can't provide that for you tonight, but we can do some follow-up.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything further?
Mr. Mayor, I think Mr. Caulfield had his hand up.
And
Okay.
Councilmember Moss.
He's got to learn how to use the clicker here. Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. Deputy Mayor Whalen. So the Sound Transit System Access Funds that the city's received, I think it's about $2 million. And those are grant proceeds that we received last year for the redevelopment of 111th over there in the Kendrick neighborhood that we expect to initiate construction on next year.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I was just going to ask,
Ms. Moss.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Spears, have you heard any requests from Sound Transit to expand the parking area?
not expand. What they are asking or what they're planning to do at the station itself is improving the access to their parking and to the platforms. But I have not heard anything about expanding their parking area.
Do you know what the capacity is at this point? Is it full?
I do not know. Would Mr. Buer maybe have an answer for that?
It's at 90% capacity. When Sound Transit did purchase the property many years ago, there is an area from which to expand and I believe add another 300 parking spaces. But so far, that's not been a point of discussion with Sound Transit.
Okay, thank you.
Right, anyone else? Well, thank you, Ms. Spear and Mr. Buer. And I'm sure we'll hear a lot of this going down the road. Now we move to a review of the fee assessment for public safety calls for services. And for this, we have Ms. Wachter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor Whalen, and members of the council. Heidi Wachter, City Attorney for the City of Lakewood. You've been provided with a fairly brief memo, and the best way to summarize it is that for the city to charge a fee for service, one way to get there is if you have statutory authorization. The city uses this tool. The example of it is for DUI cost recovery. If we're able to, our prosecutors go into court and we ask for emergency response services associated with the DUI arrest. And we've used that tool successfully. The other way that you can do cost recovery is, and we've taken advantage of this tool as well, is when you've got a demonstrable track record of consistently spending taxpayer dollars on something that appears to be for not much public benefit. And the example of that is your false alarm program. And this is used in cities throughout the state, where the police are spending time that could be spent on legitimate calls going to false alarms. And so in many jurisdictions, they've adopted a fee that people who have these alarms pay when they're needlessly drawing police response. So we've done those things. One jurisdiction that has tried to use that model, and so far successfully, but I want to get into some of the details about whether it fits here, is the city of Tacoma does something called Lift Assist. And it's used by their fire department when they respond to a nursing home, because they had discovered that routinely the nursing homes were calling for emergency aid for the sole and exclusive purpose of lifting people. And as they did their research into this, what they discovered was that this was a method that the business was using for handing the liability over to the city. In a nursing home, when you're lifting people who have fallen, there's some significant liability associated with it. So I did personally, at the manager's request, reach out to the city of Tacoma and discussed with them a little bit about this Lift Assist program. They have it on their website. I believe I've linked it in my materials. And what you'll see is that they have nursing homes and licensed care facilities subject to this fee, not more group home, adult family home type settings. So I discussed that with the legal department in Tacoma. And the way they've drawn the distinction is that the nursing home is perceived to be using this as a way to subsidize their business model. And therefore, by implementing a fee along with an educational program, they can retrain the businesses that lifting patients when they fall is actually part of what the patient is there for, not to be subsidized by emergency services paid for by the taxpayers. However, with adult family homes, the perception is that when the call comes in, it's not necessarily part of the business model. It may very well be an individual calling. And they do distinguish between business model emergency response versus an individual call for emergency help. I don't want to speak for the chief of police or any fire chief, but they get all kinds of individual calls for service that aren't really associated with a business model. So that's how they drew the distinction. That is not a tool that we have been asked to look further into, and it is a fairly unique tool among cities. the tools that are more common, we are actively using in the city of Tacoma or in the city of Lakewood. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Questions from Ms. Wachter? All right, while we're waiting to see if there are any, I guess the short summary is no.
The short summary is no. Yes, that's correct. Correct. And consistent with some of the other things that we heard about, other pieces of the puzzle that Tacoma used in drawing its distinction.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Wachter? Ms. Farmer?
I was curious in the comparison with Tacoma, particularly when it comes to group and adult family homes. I think Lakewood has quite a few more adult family homes than Tacoma. I don't know about group homes necessarily, but I wonder if there is a one-to-one comparison there.
I think your question is a good one, Councilmember Farmer and members of the council, because you're absolutely right. Tacoma has more of the business model licensed nursing care type facilities. I don't know if we actually have more adult family homes. We're a different size city, but we definitely have a concentration of adult family homes here. That is correct. That doesn't necessarily go to the heart of what Tacoma is saying is the distinction for them, but I did push them a little further just to ask whether some of this has to do with where they perceived potential pushback to what they were implementing. And there did seem to be some acknowledgement of the potential pushback from certain segments of the industry.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thanks for the legal work. It's better to have the correct answer than embark on a journey that ends in despair. We'll now move to comments by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson, and good evening, council. A few updates for you, and then at the end, I have one item I'd like to bring to your attention. I think I had reported last week that we're expecting to hear from Office of Economic Development in regard to our DCIP, our Defense Community Infrastructure Program grant for the JBLM North Access Project, and they had anticipated to let those communities that were moving on to the next level notify them by this Saturday. We haven't heard anything one way or the other. What we have done, however, is we've reached out to Congressman Heck's office and his team here in state, as well as in the other Washington, are reaching out on our behalf to find out exactly what's going on there. So once I have some information, I'll be sure to share that with you all. Also wanted to let you know that we've had some conversations with LASA over on Gravely Lake Drive, the homeless shelter that's over there. They have an interest in expanding and understand that there's a piece of property that is for sale that's adjacent to them. And we've actually provided a letter of support in their initiative to secure some what's called 2163 monies through Pierce County, which actually the city of Lakewood contributes to. And I know they had a deadline to submit that grant. I think it was a week ago, Friday or so. But just wanted to let you know, we continue to work with LASA and trying to help them, expand their operations over there. Also, Habitat for Humanity, they are in the process of moving forward with even more low-income housing over in the Tillicum neighborhood. There's property we refer to as the Boat Street property, which is actually an abatement property dating back a number of years. And they are looking to construct 4 duplexes and a single-family residential home, again, all for low-income families. And they expect, once again, to partner with us in utilizing our city's CDBG and home funds. Also, in the area of partnerships, we were, last couple of weeks, we were working with the Nisqually tribe to include their tribal council. The purpose of that was to, get their okay for us, being the city of Lakewood, as well as SSMCP, to pursue funding in support of I-5 improvements over the Nisqually Delta. The impetus for this was that SSMCP, of which Lakewood is a part of, we recently had a meeting to talk about transportation priorities within the I-5 corridor from Mounts Road all the way down to exit 99 in Tumwater. And the good news is that there's a number of projects that have been identified, total $195 million. However, what's not included in there is the need to reconstruct, again, I-5 over the Delta. It is right now, the way that I-5 is constructed continues to cause the Nisqually River to bow, which is creating incredible environmental issues as well as issues relating to fish passage. And then from an economic development standpoint, if that area was to ever flood, and I think many of us might remember the flooding that occurred down in Lewis County a number of years ago, would shut down I-5, which is, the north-south main arterial for, the lifeline of commerce here in Washington State. So here in Lakewood, we were a little disappointed to see that there was only planning money included in there to, continue looking at options rather than hard construction dollars. Now the construction estimate to replace that segment of I-5 north and south ranges from $800 million to $2 billion. So it's a sizable amount of monies, but one way or the other, it does need to be addressed. So what we did, since the Nisqually tribe was not at the table for this particular part of the discussion, is we reached out to them and explained the situation and wanted to let them know that certainly in Lakewood, we support that initiative. Their tribal council held a meeting. They too concurred and provide us a letter of support, asking that SSMCP also continue to focus on addressing that key transportation issue as well. Also, just wanted to point out that the Nisqually tribe is a key member of SSMCP as well. But again, just wanted to give you a courtesy heads up that we had been working with the Nisqually tribe on that. The Port of Tacoma, at your next regular meeting, which is next Monday, as a matter of fact, the Port of Tacoma reached out to us. You may be aware they are going through a pretty significant strategic planning process as it relates to the port. And so they had asked to make a presentation to this body, and we identified next Monday as a good time for them. And so the commission president, John McCarthy, will be online as part of your meeting to give you a presentation there. Along those lines, as it relates to your council agenda, there was a number of things that we've been kind of putting off, presentations, proclamations, business showcase. Given the fact that highly likely we're going to continue to be in this virtual environment for the foreseeable future, we have redocketed a number of those items. For example, at your next meeting, we have 3 business showcases that we'd like you to recognize here in the community. And again, try and return to some level of normalcy as it relates to your agenda, even though you're still operating in a virtual environment. Likewise, we are moving forward with a virtual hearing examiner. We have 3 applicants that have been patiently waiting. And so we've been working with the hearing examiner to have a hearing on September 14th. And the 2 up front on the docket is the conditional use permit change that the Clover Park School District has relating to the Dr. Claudia Thomas new middle school. They have a minor modification there, as well as the Pierce College, their master facility plan, which is very, very well done. And so we'll have those 2. And then the following week, we have docketed a shoreline permit request that will be then considered. Also, in the area of joint meetings with this body, the newly constituted, or really, the newly constituted Lakewood African American Police Advisory Committee, they have got up and running again. I know I've reported that out to you. They had another meeting last week. And so one of the things that we've asked them is when they're ready, and could be as soon as September 14th, would they be interested in having a joint meeting with this body? So once we hear back, we'll certainly keep you appraised of that. The census here in Lakewood continues to do a whole lot better than 10 years ago, particularly in some of our underrepresented areas. For example, the Tillicum and Woodbrook census tract now has a response rate of over 50%, actually approaching 51%. In 2010, it was 28%. Likewise, in Springbrook is at 42%. whereas in 2010, it was 34%. And then citywide, we're on par with, what's happening nationally. One of the things that the Census Bureau did do is, well, the census was supposed to end on April 30th of this year, but because of COVID-19, they extended it out to October 31st, end of October. However, last week or the week before, they decided to knock another month off and end the census on September 30th. Really don't have a reason. The only thing we can speculate is most likely that nationwide the census is probably going a little bit better than they anticipated, and they don't need that additional months to do that. But here in Lakewood, our team led by planning manager Tiffany Spear continues to do a good job to get people to stand up and be counted, if you will. Just wanted to reference that the financial audit has been completed, and if you haven't had an opportunity, it's posted online, both our comprehensive annual financial report as well as a more executive summary called our popular annual financial report are also posted online. Wanted to commend our finance team for the great work that they have done there in producing that document. As we gear up for conversations with both our congressional delegation and our state delegation, one of the things that we're hearing is no more paper copy. Everything needs to be done electronically. As part of our state legislative agenda, one of the things that we are doing is developing videos for each of the major initiatives. So, for example, the city's request for tax increment financing or something along those lines in support of Lakewood Landing and Roof and WashDOT, we're developing a video. Likewise, our request for funding and support of Wards Lake, we're looking at developing a video. So not only would we email down to them the actual hard copy of the document, but then they would get also a link to a video that even better explains what we're trying to achieve with our request for funding and or policy assistance. Our request for a temporary, or rather our request, actually we were approached, the city was requested to provide an opportunity for temporary outdoor seating. And we have actually 3 businesses that have taken advantage of it. Both the Macaw Casino and the Caribbean Casinos, which is part of Great American Casino, both have permits for outdoor seating. And then Chips Casino is also looking to do the same. And then there's been a handful of other restaurants who have inquired about it. And so again, another tool in the toolbox to try and help out, particularly our restaurants during this pandemic. A key initiative that we've been talking about with Camp Murray over a number of years has been whether or not Camp Murray would be interested in being annexed into the city. And as I know I reported last year, the answer to that question was they would consider it. However, it needs to be cost neutral. It can't cost them any money. So our team here at the city worked with their representatives over at Camp Murray. And long story short, unfortunately, there really isn't a way to get to a cost neutral analysis. If the city was to incorporate Camp Murray, it would actually cost them additional funds rather than staying as part of Pierce County. However, we do still think that there could be some win-win opportunities there, particularly as it relates to the boat launch, which is part of Camp Murray, even though the fence line is not encompassing all of that. And so we want to continue to have a dialogue with them. And a couple of the options there could be just to annex the boat launch, which would then allow the city to work in partnership with a number of partners to improve that for better access to American Lake. Or another option would actually be to assume the lease that Fish and Wildlife has down there for access to American Lake. So again, we've been in contact with Camp Murray. Unfortunately, the leadership team at Camp Murray, they are serving point on this whole COVID-19 pandemic, and highly unlikely they're going to be available to meet until sometime in October. But I just wanted to give this body a courtesy heads up that we continue to have conversations and have done some pretty significant analysis there, and certainly more to come. The last item I have, and I apologize, for the kind of dumping this on you, but it came to my attention later this afternoon. So you might remember about a month or so ago, just in passing, I had mentioned that Pierce County was looking to create some emergency shelter, some emergency housing. And so Pierce County has been working with representatives from Tacoma, Puyallup, University Place, and Lakewood. And this is in reference to a Department of Commerce grant that is authorized under a particular bill that the state legislature passed last year, and or last session rather, earlier this year as part of this session. And long story short, Pierce County sent over this grant application and has asked Lakewood to sign onto it. My recommendation is that we do sign onto it. What it will allow is it will allow those aforementioned cities and the county to partner to be able to qualify for $4.7 million in funding. And that funding would be used to construct 2 projects within Tacoma, which would be portable housing units, anywhere from 32 to 50. And right now, the county and the city of Tacoma would be partnering with an organization called the Low Income Housing Institute. However, those portable housing units could also be made available to other communities, and not just Tacoma, but also within Pierce County, Puyallup, Lakewood, and University Place. The second component is that the city of Puyallup and Pierce County are looking to contract with a specific housing provider, I don't have their name, to build a 30-bed facility in eastern Pierce County. And so those 2 projects are a combined $4.7 million. Now, the caveat is this. The caveat is the city of Lakewood can either bring its money to the table on this, which totals $367,000. And that's if we all partner together. However, if we don't partner together, the city would have available $293,000. So the county, again, has reached out to us. They have a deadline to submit the grant, which is, I think it's Wednesday. And so again, I apologize for just kind of bringing this forward to you, but it's something that's been moving very, very quickly. I think in summary, this is a great initiative that, the cities and the county are working on with available state monies, again, to bring emergency shelter beds to the Pierce County area, to include Lakewood. So unless there's any objection, I would just need a nod to be able to go ahead and sign that grant application on behalf of Lakewood. So Mayor and Council, that's what I have.
Right. Is there an obligation to fund this if you sign the grant application?
It's my understanding, Mayor, that the answer is yes, because they expect to receive the grant.
Well, it's anticipated that you participate. I mean, if it's actual obligation, doesn't the council have to act on it?
So I'm seeing the city attorney nod. So I would need to find, again, I just learned about this afternoon. So I would need to find out more on that.
And Mr. Mayor and members of the council, to put a finer point on it, because I was in the email chain, the manager found out about it at about 6, and this is because that's when Pierce County provided us the information. So we are moving as quickly as we can. If we find out that a true legislative step is required of this, or if there's some allocation expected of us, we will make sure that we have all those lined up, but literally about an hour before the council meeting started. So we're just trying to make sure that we don't miss a deadline unintentionally.
Actually, I'd like to clarify. I don't know if Pierce County let us know at 6, but that's when I was notified, was at 6. So just want to be clear.
And do you know the source of the funding?
It's through the Department of Commerce, and it's through their program called the Shelter Grant Program, and it's authorized under Senate Bill 6181.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Whalen.
On that topic, John, I think we all saw an article in the paper today or yesterday about homelessness in Lakewood and housing issues. So my question if we get more information about this grant and this regional cooperation, that would be great, of course. The other question I had for you with regard to the LAHSA comments you made earlier, I know when I did the point in time count, we went over there and chatted with Jan about their desire to get that additional property in the back to provide additional housing opportunities or facilities of some sort. At some point last year, we had set aside some money for the Pierce County Library to help facilitate potentially their acquisition of property. And we would anticipate getting paid back when they did their financing. Is this something we can think about doing if we had some modest amount that we could possibly help facilitate the acquisition of that property in anticipation of getting paid back once they get the 2163 financing?
So Deputy Mayor Whalen, absolutely. I had a conversation with the executive director on that. Very similar to the over $1 million that this body provided to LAHSA a number of years ago to build their current facility. So there could be, CDBG, Section 108, or home funds that could be available to help them out.
Well, I, for one, would like to look into that because I do think it's an opportunity with an existing provider that knows what they're doing, that serves Lakewood people. They're well known for doing it. They have a board of directors made up of Lakewood citizens that do good work out there. And it would be good to kind of further inquire what we can do to facilitate that. From my perspective, if we get a few other folks on board to push the envelope, that would be great too.
I'd agree with Mr. Whalen. I would like to add, I was going to do it in council comments, but I think it's pertinent now. With respect to that article, something that I overlooked explaining to the reporter is that the principal funder of the homelessness response in Pierce County is Pierce County, but it's not all, but the money is, and the money principally goes to nonprofits in Tacoma, like Associated Ministries and Catholic Community Services. They're the two biggest, and the Tacoma Rescue Mission, but those are the big ones. There are more. That money isn't Pierce County General Fund money. There's about $14 million in 2019 was federal pass-through and state pass-through money for the county as a whole, which included Lakewood. And $11 million was from document recording fee money. And we could theoretically, with great discomfort to the county auditor trying to sort it out, say we want the document recording fee homelessness funds for 2060, 2163 that are generated out of Lakewood. For efficiency, we cede that to Pierce County's process, and Mr. Buer is a participant in the committee on 2060. And that money comes out, but more often than not, it goes to those Tacoma nonprofits. It doesn't come to LAHSA, for example. So if you took it on a per capita basis, and that's not accurate, but it just gives you some idea of the scope, $11 million in document recording fee among 900,000 people would generate, a Lakewood share being over $10 per capita. That money is actually concentrated in Tacoma because it has more real estate activity. But that gives you an idea that there may be $250,000, $500,000, depending on the year, generated in those funds from Lakewood that is really up to Lakewood to distribute, but we've joined with Pierce County in having that distributed, and then it flows to these centralized providers. So maybe part of the answer is getting nonprofits that are Lakewood centric more involved in the request for those funds and wrest them from the control of the centralized agency. And that goes along with Mr. Whalen's idea that we might be able to front it and then get money back from
Yep.
2060 or 2163 funds distributed by the county based on application by LASA, and cover the cost there. So, but that's one thing that's missing in this assumption that, well, Tacoma's got all these things. No, it's not the city of Tacoma. It's everybody's money flowing to the county, for the most part, funding the nonprofits that are in Tacoma. In fact, in the 2060 interlocal agreement, there's a provision that gives a haircut to the associated ministries for administration on a perpetual basis, which is, I think, blatantly illegal, but it needs to be corrected. But they do the work, but that gives you an example of how ingrained that is. So that's my rant, or I guess actually not so much a rant as an explanation of how that money flows and where it comes from. It's not that Lakewood citizens aren't contributing.
So you'd be in support of trying to see what we can do to help acquire that property and get this ball rolling?
Yeah, I think it'd be a legitimate 2060
Right.
or 2163 grant application to the county that should be favorably considered, given the
Yep.
lack of assistance that has come out of those programs to Lakewood in the past.
So so Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council, so it's our understanding that they did submit a grant application for 2163 monies, because we actually wrote a letter in support of it.
What's the status, though, Mr. Caulfield, of the property acquisition? Is it dependent upon them getting the 2163 loan monies, or is it currently up for sale, or do they have it under contract, or do they need to get money to get it under contract?
I don't know, other than Deputy Mayor, they did make an offer on the property that I understand was accepted contingent on them getting the funding.
Okay. Maybe we can weigh in a little bit, see how we might help some way, somehow.
Yeah, maybe Ms. Wachter and team could offer to take a look at it and see how strong a link they have to actually being able to hold the seller to selling. Any other questions for the city manager? Okay, we'll go to council comments. Ms. Moss. Up in the right corner, secret square.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good. I have nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Branstetter.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just an observation and a question. I appreciate the work that city staff did tonight to present the information it did to us. There is a lot to think about here. As to Mr. Branstetter, I have a question for you, sir. Where's the birthday cake? Deputy Mayor Whalen and I are getting hungry. Today's your
Indeed.
day, and I don't see that cake.
I am not a birthday cake person, okay? We made California rolls for a birthday.
Well, then, Mr. Whalen and I'm sure a few others would like some of those rolls. Branstetter, what's going on here, man?
I'll
think
find
after
a
all
way to
this time-
distribute some.
Well, anyway, Mr. Mayor, that's all I've got.
I've heard of legal seafood from Boston, but I've never heard of virtual seafood. Ms. Farmer.
I too was going to wish Councilmember Branstetter a happy birthday. And Councilmember Simpson beat me to it. That's awesome. But I think we're gonna need to sing, because I recall that we've already sung to one council member earlier this year. But before that, I have a question for you, Mr. Mayor. I was chatting with a government relations staffer at AWC earlier today, and she mentioned that she's working with the city manager and some other folks with their cities across the state about some things that we might all have in common, given today's environment with police reform issues such as body cams and staffing and what have you. And it made me wonder about your mayor's group that was convened, I believe, around housing and homelessness issues earlier this year or last year. And I was curious if there had been any talk about reconvening around racial justice issues, diversity, equity, inclusion, anything that we might all have in common here in Pierce County?
Not in that context. We did have a meeting last week of the committees. They hired a consultant. They've come back with some suggestions for possible governance if we want to create an entity or continue as a coalition, how formalized we want to make it. And this was a meeting of this SHAPE steering committee. And so we're going along that line and focusing on housing. And there's an element of equity in that, but it's not going to stray into the police arena. I can tell you there is a multi-departmental task force type of group at Pierce County looking into that for the sheriff's office that will in all likelihood kind of tentatively agreed that the committee is going to recommend body cams for all sheriffs. How to get there, and the recommendation of how to get there from here is still under consideration. So that's what I know.
Thank you.
Mr. Whalen.
Nothing magnanimous to report. I had the chance to go out to Anderson Island this weekend at the invitation of Councilmember Richardson. I went out with Mayor Lucas and we attended an American Legion meeting out there, which is kind of a fun tour to see what's been going on in their neighborhood during COVID. So it was a worthwhile visit to meet some folks. That was good. And in terms of birthday wishes, I wish Councilmember Branstad a happy birthday. My daughter has her birthday today. She's 22. You might have a few years on her, but not very many. You're looking great. So we're all ready to sing and eat cake. As they say, let them eat cake, right? Is that for the lawyers?
So
22.
I would invite everyone to unmute because I figured that we would sing our way out of this meeting. Mr. Branstetter deserves some special attention because he is literally all dressed up with nowhere to go.
Birthday boy. He does.
So follow me and we will sing happy birthday and adjourn at the conclusion. Happy birthday
to
you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
dear
Councilmember
Michael.
Branstad.
Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Yours.
I'm
My
sure
wife
that's
is
gonna
singing her
be
ears off.
viral on YouTube tomorrow.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Happy birthday, Mike. We're adjourned.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.